What is the Bitcoin bubble and the future of currency? Not too long ago, the value of all the Bitcoins in the world blew past $1 billion for the first time ever. That's a very impressive achievement for a purely virtual currency backed by no central bank or other authority. It could also be temporary. We're in the middle of a Bitcoin bubble right now, and at some point that bubble could burst. Bitcoins were designed to be, in many ways, are the perfect digital currency. They're frictionless, anonymous, and cryptographically astonishingly secure. For anybody who's ever suffered the incompetence of a bank or bristled at the fees involved in just spending money, either domestically or abroad, that is to say, for all of us, the promise of Bitcoin is the holy grail of payments, especially since to all intents and purposes, Bitcoins are invisible to law enforcement and the taxman. Those strengths are also weaknesses. No one wants to risk losing millions of dollars worth of currency overnight just because they were outsmarted by some computer hacker. Still, for the time being, Bitcoin is in many ways the best and cleanest payment mechanism the world has ever seen. So if we're ever going to create something better, we're going to have to learn from what Bitcoin does right as well as what it does wrong. The source code for Bitcoin is free and public, which means that just about every hacker and cryptographer in the world has a crack at it. And they've all come to the same conclusion: it really works. There are question marks over just how anonymous it is and just how scalable it is, but when Bitcoins first arrived in early 2009, right at the height of a massive global crisis of capitalism, they had immediate and magnetic appeal to the anarcho-utopian crowd of techno-libertarians who drive an enormous amount of innovation online. Some people, including Satoshi Nakamoto, are far from unique in their mistrust of all existing financial institutions. What sets Nakamoto apart is that he turned that mistrust into a philosophy, the most important driving force behind the Bitcoin project. When he introduced Bitcoin to the world in February 2009, Nakamoto boasted that his new currency was completely decentralized with no trust parties, and he explained in some detail what he saw as the problem and in need of a solution. The root problem with conventional currency is all the trust that's required to make it work. The central bank must be trusted not to debase the currency, but the history of fiat currencies is full of breaches of that trust. Banks must be trusted to hold our money and transfer it electronically, but they lend it out in ways of credit bubbles with rarely a fraction in reserve. We have to trust them with our privacy, trust them not to let identity thieves drain our accounts. Nakamoto's no paranoid crazy. What he says here is not all that different from what Warren Buffett wrote in his 2012 letters to shareholders. Investments that are denominated in a given currency include money market funds, bonds, mortgages, bank deposits, and other instruments. Most of these currency-based investments are thought of as safe. In fact, in truth, they are among the most dangerous of assets. Over the past century, these instruments have destroyed the purchasing power of investors in many countries, even as these holders continue to receive timely payments of interest and principal. This ugly result, moreover, will forever recur. Governments determine the ultimate value of money, and systematic forces will sometimes cause them to gravitate to policies that produce inflation. From time to time, such policies spin out of control. Even in the US, where the wish for a stable currency is strong, the dollar has fallen a staggering 86% in value since 1995. If you hold dollars, you're trusting the US government not to destroy your wealth. Bitcoin, by contrast, is based on mistrust. It's specifically designed so that it's every man for himself. All in vain was blamed for many in this Bitcoin community for stupidity. What was he thinking keeping his wallet on a Windows computer attached to the open internet? But even with Bitcoin, people nearly always end up trusting someone, and the entity they're trusting often turns out to be unreliable. But given how much money can be made by hacking into these companies, and given that law enforcement authorities are unlikely to make any attempt to go after the perpetrators, there will always be a pretty substantial risk that clients will lose their money. Bitcoin's built-in mistrust of institutions does not set it apart from fiat currency. It also sets it apart from other virtual currencies such as Facebook credits in the US, QQ coins in China, or Linden dollars in Second Life. All these currencies are closely controlled and guarded by the companies that invented them, and have very little value outside that particular ecosystem. That said, credits and World of Warcraft are valuable enough that Chinese prison guards reportedly force convicts to perform monotonous tasks within the game for 12-hour stretches at a time, building up credits which can be sold for many times the guard's official salary. Some of those virtual currencies are roughly the same order of magnitude as Bitcoin in size. Although it's hard to make apples to apples comparison, revenues from Facebook credits are running at a rate of about $1 billion a year. For instance, and the market in QQ coins was so big in 2007 that the Chinese central bank, fearing that it was losing control of the money supply, cracked down on their use, calling on companies to stop trading them. In the latest bubble, Bitcoin transaction volume has managed to exceed $30 million in one day, and most days are seeing volumes of more than $5 million. That works out to about $2 billion in volume per day, so long as the bubble does not burst. But the biggest difference between Bitcoin and other virtual currencies is that Bitcoin are the only one which has speculative value. What's more, because they are not tied to a corporate parent, Bitcoin appeals to the web and arco-libertarians in a way that no other virtual currency can. Bitcoins hold exactly the same gleaming promise for techno-utopians as gold is for Glenn Beck. They're a scarce resource, and there's no government or corporation which can control the resource. Bitcoins, like gold, are beholden to no government. They cannot be printed by any central bank, and they certainly won't be subject to hyperinflation, since the global supply of Bitcoin will never exceed 21 million. Like gold, Bitcoins are minted, but unlike gold, no one can stumble over some large seam and make a fortune. Mining for Bitcoins involves an enormous amount of computer power and very little luck, and the global rate at which new Bitcoins will be mined is both predetermined and slowing down. There were about 3 million coins outstanding at the beginning of 2010. There are about 11 million coins outstanding today, and we'll get to 14 million in early 2014. Come 2022 or so, assuming Bitcoins are still used, then the rate of growth of Bitcoins will be so low that to a first approximation, the money supply will be constant. This carries with it its own problems, as we'll see. But there's no risk that some central bank will print millions of new Bitcoins, thereby diluting or inflating away the value of existing ones. As the reverberations from the financial crisis continue to echo, people betting on a decline of trust in government have been stocking up on gold and Bitcoins, or rather gold or Bitcoins, although they can be equally zealous respective to other asset classes. There is surprisingly little overlap between gold bugs on the one hand and the Bitcoin community on the other. These are the perfect assets for rugged individualists who trust their guns or their ultra-secure passwords more than they do their country. And in times of global turmoil, as we're seeing today, such assets can perform very well. The immediate impetus for the current spike in Bitcoin prices, of course, is the events in Cyprus. There, the government, under extreme pressure from the EU, first proposed taking all bank accounts, even the insured ones, by at least 7%. That did not work, but now uninsured account holders at Cyprus's two largest banks stand to lose most of their money. It's a stark reminder of the dangers associated with depositing money in a bank. Bitcoin has suddenly become popular in Cyprus for obvious reasons. No government can confiscate your Bitcoins or prevent you from transporting them out of the country. On the other hand, if your bank account is frozen, it is hard to find the money needed to buy coins. More generally, Bitcoin could be emerging as a very useful currency in police states or anywhere that monetary policy could fail catastrophically. At the end of 2011, for instance, there was a significant uptick of Bitcoin activity in Belarus and Ukraine, two countries at severe risk of hyperinflation. If you want to protect your wealth from the policies of your national government or from the inflationary policies of a heterodox central bank, then Bitcoins can be a very good way of doing so in a largely undetectable manner. Of course, acquiring Bitcoins in such countries can be non-trivial. There's not a lot of liquidity on the major internet exchanges from people looking to sell Bitcoins and buy the Ukrainian hryvnia. And even if there were, your local Ukrainian bank might frown on sending lots of hryvnia to Mt. Gox. But it's conceivable that people in Ukraine and Cyprus, especially information workers, might start working for Bitcoin, spending them on goods and services and introducing them into the local economy that way. At which point one can envisage the coins getting the same kind of status, at least among the information elite, that dollars had in the Soviet era. Bitcoins then are like cash, but they take the idea a step further than has ever been possible. If you give me $100 bill, the transaction is anonymous and untraceable, but we both need to be in the same place at the same time. And it helps if we both live in a country where the US dollar is an accepted unit of currency. With Bitcoin, transfers can take place across continent and time zones with no problem, no time lags, and very small transaction fees, and no banks are involved. No central bank controls the money supply. No taxes ever need to be paid. Once you've obtained a stash of Bitcoins, they're yours to do with as you like. And there's lots that you can do with Bitcoins. You can convert them into any of a dozen currencies on various online exchanges. You can gamble with them in online casinos, or you can just go out and spin them. The list of things which have been bought with Bitcoins is very long and is by no means confined to laptop computers and computer programming services. Hotels take them. A sock manufacturer in Massachusetts is famous for accepting Bitcoins. And the more enthusiastic members of the Bitcoin community regularly do like split checks at a restaurant, even one which doesn't take Bitcoin itself, by transferring coins to the person paying in dollars. And then more notoriously, there's Silk Road, a site which is not only a hub of Bitcoin activity, but also played an important role in the first Bitcoin bubble. The rise in market value of Bitcoin in 2011, which made the rest of the world sit up and pay attention to what was going on. Silk Road and Bitcoins, like the public conscious on Bitcoins, were and still are the only currency accepted on Silk Road, and overnight they became a speculative bet on the online future of illegal trading. The price of Bitcoins, which had never before traded in the double digits, surged in just 1 week to as much as $33 a piece. The value of Bitcoin, it turns out, is highly sensitive to media coverage. A year earlier, in July 2010, the influential tech site Slashdot posted a short-term item about Bitcoin which sent the price soaring tenfold, from less than a cent to about 7 cents per Bitcoin, also in a few days. In a single week, a single post on time.com in April was enough to double the price of Bitcoins in a week, from 80 cents to $1.60. Even the article you're reading now is appearing now because of the current bubble and will at the margin help to continue inflated. For speculators, the math is incredibly compelling. If you spend $100 on Bitcoin the day after the Slashdot article came out, those coins would have been worth around $73,000 when the Gawker article came out just under a year later. And they would have been worth $250,000 a week after that. Today they would be worth more than $20 million. There aren't many perfectly legal investments which offer that kind of return. All of them which help explain the current Bitcoin bubble as well. Each time the value of a Bitcoin hits a new higher or new milestone, there's more press coverage of the phenomenon, drawing more people in and sending the value of Bitcoins even higher. Indeed, if you chart the value of Bitcoins against the number of times that they're being talked about on Twitter, you'll see a very strong correlation. And because of the Cypress connection, mainstream publications have a handy real-world news hook now with which to explain the Bitcoin phenomenon. This is actually a serious problem if you're trying to put together a currency rather than a vehicle for financial speculation. If the currency of a country ever fluctuated as much as Bitcoin did, it would never be taken seriously as a medium exchange. How are you meant to do business in a place where an item costing 1 unit of currency is worth $10 one day and $20 the next? Currencies need a modicum of stability. Indeed, one of the main selling points of Bitcoin was that it couldn't be destabilized by government institutions. But that comes as scant comfort to people watching the value of Bitcoin behave like some kind of demented internet stock during the dot-com bubble. And just like demented internet stocks, Bitcoins have seen busts as well as bubbles. In the second half of 2011, for instance, the value of Bitcoins retreated from their peak of $30 each to a lower point closer to $3. In reality, then, Bitcoin does not really behave like a currency at all in terms of its market value. It looks much more like a highly volatile commodity. That's by design. Bitcoins were created by the most fungible commodity the world has ever seen, to the point at which they would effectively erase the distinction between a commodity and a currency. But is that a good idea? Dollars are a universally accepted unit of account. If something in the world has a price, it has a price in dollars. Dollars are not, on the other hand, physical commodities. The overwhelming majority of dollars in the world are deposited safely and electronically in banks. There's something weird and self-defeating about the kind of people who keep their savings stuffed under the mattress. In Hollywood, if you show someone counting out huge sums of money, that's an easy way for the director to say that he's a criminal. Bitcoin was constructed to behave like currency. It's very easy to use Bitcoin to pay for goods and services, especially if what you're buying is in a different country. Right now, there's literally no way to build a website selling some kind of service and have a meaningful fraction of the world's online population be able to pay you for that service. Bitcoin was designed to solve the problem, to be in effect the lingua franca of online commerce. But it's very hard to be a currency when you're also a commodity, governed by rules of scarcity and subject to a speculative attack. And it's also very hard to be a currency or even a commodity for that matter when you're as small as Bitcoin is. Even now at the top of a huge bubble, the total value of all the Bitcoins in existence is the equivalent of about 2,000 standard gold bars. Not remotely enough to revolutionize the global payment and currency system as we know them. Given the choice between something old and solid on the other hand and something new and virtual on the other, the market is still voting for the asset class which has proved its wealth over 1,000 years.